I'm Elliot Ramsey, curator of the Polygon Gallery in North Vancouver, Canada. And Vancouver is a place where my Black and Black-descended friends and colleagues have observed a lack of Black presence. I don't know that I agree, or maybe I don't see this absence because my family has roots here. They've been Black in Vancouver for generations. And yet when I'm curating an exhibition like As We Rise, Photography from the Black Atlantic, featuring nearly 80 photographers from the Americas, Europe, and Africa, there's only one Vancouverite among them, Stan Douglas. This piece is from a series called The Malabar People, in which Douglas created a fictional 1950s Vancouver nightclub called The Malabar, and imagined the folks who would have inhabited it. Which is to say, some of the biggest acts in 20th century entertainment came through Vancouver on the trains, performing at venues like The Cave on Hornby Street, which opened in 1937. This city was the hub where trains from up the coast connected with those going across the continent. Many visitors would have been drawn to Hogan's Alley, a multiracial neighborhood that was the heart of the Black community. Vancouver has its own homegrown talent too, like the remarkable Eleanor Collins, Canada's first lady of jazz, and the first Black person in North America to headline a national TV show before Nat King Cole. With all this history, Vancouver feels underrepresented in the exhibition I'm working on. Even its title, Photography from the Black Atlantic, seems to exclude this place where my grandfather came of age, where he and my grandmother raised my aunt and my father. I want to locate the Black Pacific. For us, the story starts here. Breton, Alberta, about 95 kilometers southwest of Edmonton, was originally called Keystone. It was one of several homesteads in Western Canada where Black immigrants established themselves around 1910, and many of them were fleeing the segregation laws of the Jim Crow South. I can, in fact, identify these people. They're my great-grandparents. They got married in Keystone in 1915, but they moved around a lot, to Hanley, Saskatchewan, where my granddad was born, then to the Okanagan, seeking easier land to farm. After my great-grandfather passed away in 1927 at the age of 35, my great-grandmother, now a single mom, took her 6 kids to Vancouver. When my granddad, Harold Ramsey, grew up in Vancouver, there weren't a lot of career options for Black workers, and a lot of men took jobs with the Canadian Pacific Railway as porters. Granddad was one of them. During the war, he applied to the Air Force, but they didn't want men of color, so he stayed with the trains, which were an essential service. Granddad worked first as a sleeping car porter and then as a porter instructor. He saved a lot of memorabilia, and it's here that I'm struck by the diminishment of Black participation. Going through issues of the Canadian Pacific Railway's industry magazine, I don't see Black workers profiled, even though the trains ran on their labor. The centennial issue of its newspaper, published 1981, runs a story headlined, "History is a National Mosaic of Flesh and Blood People," and yet it only seems to profile white men and opens with a quote from Thomas Carlyle. That special anniversary publication features all paintings, no photographs, and still there's a conscious decision not to depict Black people. These are national documents, but I wonder about the implications for Vancouver in particular. Vancouver was the terminus of major routes. Its rail history is intimately connected to its Black history, and looking at these publications, you'd never know it. And then, of course, train use fell with the rise in air travel. Hogan's Alley was expropriated and destroyed by the city of Vancouver in the late 1960s, what was euphemistically described as urban renewal, displacing its Black residents across the Lower Mainland and beyond. With changing economies, the nightlife scene shifted too. The Cave, where the Supremes and so many others performed, shut down in 1981. Stan Douglas's fictional Malabar might have been shuttered around the same time. Having grown up with stories, I didn't have to search for evidence of the important contributions of Black people to Vancouver's cultural history. But someone looking for visual evidence, like my friend and colleague Nia Lewis, would have had to contend with these erasures. She's been addressing these gaps in Vancouver's Black representation through her research.
As a student of curatorial practice and ethnographic study, much of my practice takes on a sort of intervention of archives, addressing the politics and processes of historical recovery, speculating the possibilities of making visible narratives that promote liberatory futures. My name is Nia Lewis, and I am a curator, artist, and writer currently serving as the director of ArtSpeak and the inaugural research fellow at the Vancouver Art Gallery. I'm a first-generation African Caribbean Canadian from Trinidad and Tobago, and I work across programming, writing, design, advocacy, and community organizing. I think through queries like, how might cultural production and artistic practice positively impact the quest for a more visually complex genealogy of Blackness? And how might we build an Afro-diasporic art landscape that asserts our collective will to participate without essentializing our sense of self or sense of identity? An Insufficient Record is the sum of 4 years of research. The exhibition theorizes the afterlife of the City of Vancouver Photographic Archive concerning the history of insufficient representation of Black Vancouverites and their lives in public space. Assessing the photographic constructions of race, the politics of human rights, identity formations, national narratives, and cultural memory. The work draws connections between the archival construction, surveillance of Black identities and class, and the dissolution of Black presence in Vancouver, challenging the insufficient depository of knowledge contributing to the historical trajectory of restricting representations of Blackness to caricature, ethnographic object, or criminal. The exhibition takes on a kind of cultural translation, examining the possibilities and structural limitations of transforming penal spectatorship to a participatory reshaping and rereading of carceral images. I approach curatorial practice as an opportunity to write against and alongside the absences, bringing forward modes of capture, collection, demystification, and dissemination. Vancouver is peculiar in its articulation of Black community, Black cultural production, and presentation. We begin with this rich yet challenging trajectory as Black settlers into the increasingly populous immigrant and refugee communities we see here today. I return to Wade Compton's reading of Black BC as he describes continuous exodus, immigration, settlement, integration, segregation, agitation, uprooting, rerouting, and rerouting. A people in flux, never a single monolithic population, no easily discernible common origin, and I would add a consideration of assimilation, police brutality, housing insecurity, Black artist communities up against multiple fracture points and constant interruption. A shutout, really, of Black history, monuments, art, artists, curators, thinkers, writers, and activists in this city. I think I am most interested in what and who we are outside the veil or perpetuated myth of Black Vancouver, in that it does not exist, and how this exclusion and disenfranchisement turns into an opportunity for self-actualization. While a comprehensive history of Black BC and image making remains to be written, despite the challenges of shaping a distinct Black population on the fringe of what we acknowledge as Canada's hub of Black cultural production, critical texts like Wade Compton's Blueprint serve as a pivotal archive of published Black BC, creating an invaluable research resource artistically tracing Black subject and subjectivity. Virtual archives from the Black BC History Awareness Society also do the vital work of making visible the image histories of Black pioneers, most of which centers Victoria, BC, pre- and post-Confederation. Later, media like Daphne Marlett's Opening Doors, Vancouver's East End, Andrea Fatona's Hogan's Alley, Selwyn Jacobs' The Road Taken, Michelle Lee Williams' The Afro News, The Voice of the Black Community and the Talking Drum, and Peter Hudson's Diaspora, Searching for the Black Pacific, contribute to the visual historic documentation of Black people in Vancouver. In 2020, a reinvigoration and recommitment to Black voices in the arts emerged. Black Arts Centre opened in Surrey under the direction of Rebecca Baer, Moroti George's Concealed Cultures, The Black Vernacular, Vancouver Art Gallery's first Black curated exhibition, Where Do We Go From Here, in partnership with the Centre for the Study of the Black Canadian Diaspora. The year following, their first solo exhibition from a Black Canadian artist in Jan Wade's Soul Power. Crystal Parabou's Black Strathcona Resurgence exhibition with the Vancouver Mural Festival, Fenwell Antwi's Disorientation and Echoes, Charles Campbell's Black Breath Spectacle, Denise Reiner's While Black, and most recently, I curated Sankofa, Canadian Roots, African Routes at the Museum of Anthropology, an intervention of their never-seen-before African collections in consideration of retribution and contemporary Black artist lineage. We are all searching for visualizations that affirm our presence. I believe the work moving forward is to sustain and allow room for interrogation of the demarcations of Blackness and Black art. We continue to grapple with the idea of an evolving Black Pacific, the transmission of Black cultures around the coastal territories, and the instances of cultural hybridity in the aftermath of slavery. Creating as a critical and artistic act of empowerment, foregrounding a plurality of voices, emphasizing the collective creation of knowledge through contemporary art. using new visualities to build new ways of relating, and assembling a diversity of Black culture production to consider what a progressive cartography of Black art in Vancouver may resemble.